Welcome to Carlton's Math Corner. Today we're going to be discussing integers and absolute value. To begin, please make sure that you have your math journal as well as something to write with and your vocabulary packet. So let's begin with our target. Our target today is I can read, write, and graph positive integers on a number line. So first of all, an integer is a whole number and its opposite. So if you look here, here's an example, 2 and -2. 2 is considered a whole number because it does not have any place value beyond the decimal point. The decimal point is at the end of the number because it's always after the ones place. And so there's no additional place value after that. And so it is considered a whole number. And -2 is its opposite, because this is +2 and it's -2, and they're called opposites because they are equal distance from 0. If you notice, +2 is two places away from 0, and -2 is the same amount, 2 places from 0. And so that's why they're considered opposites. Now, what I want you to notice is on this number line, notice that 0 is neutral in the middle, and we just talked about how +2 and -2 are equal distance from each other, so they're opposites of each other. But I want you to notice that as you move to the right, the numbers are getting larger. And as you move to the left, notice the negatives look like they're getting larger, but they are not. They're actually getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller the further negative that they get. Think about it. If when I think of negative amounts, I think of money right away. If you owe money to somebody, and the more you owe them, the worse off you are, because that means that is money that you have to pay back, and sometimes you have to pay that back with interest. And so the further negative that you are getting, the smaller that number truly is. It's the smallest amount that you have. If I am negative in any way in my checking account, that is less money that I have. It's really means that I don't have the money available. And the further negative I get, that is, less and less money that I have, or less and basically more money that I owe at the time. And so as the numbers are getting further negative, that means they are getting smaller and smaller. And as on the opposite side, the further positive they get, the larger, the greater amount it is. Okay, so look at this. We are going to graph some integers on a number line. Okay, so the first thing I did is I created a number line. I looked at both sets and I noticed that the largest number is +10 and the smallest number is -10. And so I created a number line including those numbers. Now, you do not have to always have 0 on your number line, but the numbers that I'm using are quite small, and so 0 just seems appropriate. I can put all the way down to -10 and all the way up to +10 on this number line. And so if I have much larger numbers, if I'm working in the 30s or the 40s, 50s, etc., then I probably wouldn't start at 0, because then my number line, I would have to count up, to count up by ones, it would take a while to get to those numbers. And so you do not have to always have 0 on your number line. You just need to make sure that you include the smallest integer as well as the largest integer within your set on your number line. So if we start graphing this, so our first number, what I would do is I would look at the smallest number that you have and start working your way up. So -10 is my smallest number. Then as I move up, I notice -7 is my next number. And so I'm going to notice I'm just putting dots on the number line. I'm plotting. That's what plotting means, is you're plotting some points, and that's our second step. And our next number is -4. then -3, and -3 is repeated twice, but I am going to leave it as just plotting it once because then it's covered for both sets. -2, then we have 0, and +2, +3, +5, and we also have +10. Now I want to look at all the numbers and make sure that I've included all of them. I have -7, +5. I am missing one number, and what number is that? Yeah, +8. We need a point on there because it's in this set. And so plotting all of these, if you notice that all of the numbers are included, the -3, I did not put 2 points for that. Now, I plotted all of these numbers in the same, on the same number line. If I was doing a homework assignment, I probably would separate them into 2 number lines, or even just change the color, like use a color for one set and then use a different color for another set so that I can see the difference between the two. I just wanted to show you how to plot integers on a number line, so I kind of put both of them together on one number line. And when you're doing this, the best thing to do to make sure that you're not forgetting one of the numbers is to cross them off as you go. So if I was using a pen right now, I would cross them off as I go, as I'm putting them on there. Now, the next thing what we're going to do is we're going to write an integer for each situation. And so looking at this, the number 1, it says an average temperature of 5 degrees is below average. Now, if we're looking for keywords, the keyword below would give me a hint on what type of integer I am working with. And so when I think of below, I think of, in Minnesota, when the temperature is below 0, what kind of numbers do you normally see? Yeah, negative numbers. And so we're going to create a negative number with 5 degrees below 0. And -5 would show us that the degrees is 5 degrees below average temperature. Now notice that my integer has no numbers, no labels, nothing attached to it. I don't have a degree sign attached to it, nothing, because when you're writing an integer, it's just a number. It doesn't include like a unit of measurement. Like this next one, it says an average rainfall of 9 inches is above normal. Well, the keyword above would mean positive. And so +9, for one, I would not put a positive sign. I would actually just type the number 9, because without a negative sign, it actually already is a positive number. Okay, and so I'm going to leave it as is, like this, and I will not add any labels such as inches or anything to this, because it asked us to just write the integer. Okay, now let's look at the next one. It says, if you rub a balloon through your hair, you can make the balloon stick to a wall. Suppose there are 17 positive charges on the wall and 25 negative charges on the balloon. Write an integer for each charge. Well, first of all, let's do 17 positive. Well, I just write 17. Because that shows me that it's a positive number. I just don't need a negative sign. Now, if I'm doing -25, now this one I need a negative in front of it. And so -25 would be my integer for the the 25 negative charges. Now let's talk about absolute value. Now, in the beginning, I talked about how -2 and +2 are equal distance from each other. Now, when we talk about distance from 0, that is called absolute value. And we use these symbols, these straight parallel lines, to show absolute value. So if I want to find the absolute value of -4 or +4, I would say that both of them, since they're opposites of each other, they are 4 spaces from each other. They have a distance of 4 units away from 0. Same thing is true is if I find the distance of -8. Well, ask yourself, how far from 0 is -8? You're right. If we look at a number line, so if we go back here, I know this only goes up to +5 and -5 and down to -5. But think about it, if I was counting, if -8 would be 3 more spaces this way. So let's count. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then I'd have to go 3 more. 6, 7, 8. It would be through 8 spaces from, or 8 units away from 0. And so the distance, or the absolute value of -8 is 8. Now notice, distance can only be written as a positive integer. There's no negative numbers, because distance, when you travel a distance, you never say to someone, well, I traveled -358 miles. Even if you drove backwards, you would never say that to someone. You're always covering a certain amount of distance, and so it's always a positive number. And so like +9, the absolute value of +9 would be 9 spaces from 0, and so that's the distance. It's 9 spaces from 0. Now, the absolute value cannot be negative. However, we can add on to it. That sometimes makes it negative, or we can take away from it, and so that will change the value of it. For instance, absolute value, notice their symbol is around -5 or -15. And so what's the absolute value of -15? Well, that would be 15, because it's 15 places from 0. But then I notice that I have -2 afterwards. So that means I need to subtract 2 from my distance. So I start off with 15 and I subtract 2, and my answer is 13. And so, and here's another way I could write it down underneath it. So if absolute value of -15 was 15 minus 2, and I get 13. Now down here, absolute value of 11 is 11. Yep, it's 11 spaces from 0. And then I'm going to add 3 to it. So my answer is 14. You're correct. Now your ticket for tomorrow, you have 4 different problems to do. Will you please try all of these for tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me at Carlton's Math Corner, and I look forward to meeting with you again.